الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. With the name of God, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. Today's leadership class will be, this is week 3, and today's title, or today what we're going over is the cooperation and the non-aggression pact of the Muslims, the pact that they made with the Jews. And the object of today's lesson is to discuss the dynamics of the Jewish-Muslim relationship in El Medina. So without further delay, I'm going to call up today's teacher for today's class, which is Professor Nadir Muhsin.
Peace and blessings be on Muhammad, Prophet, his companions, his descendants, all the Muslims. Assalamu alaikum. Today, what I'd like to do is to just give a small review of the Prophet's historical period before I go into the topic of today. As we know, the prophethood of the Prophet was for a period of 23 years, right? He first received the message in Mecca, and he propagated the message of Islam in Mecca for 10 years. And then after that, he migrated to Medina. Both of these are cities in Saudi Arabia. So he left Mecca because he was forced to leave Mecca, because conditions in Mecca became so threatening that his very life was at stake. From basically teaching compassion, mercy, feeding the poor, but this was a threat to the existing situation in Mecca. It was a threat to the existing business order. It was a threat to the existing religious order. It was a threat to the existing social order. And those who felt threatened eventually pushed him out of Mecca, along with his followers, the Muslims then. They migrated to Medina. In fact, they were invited to Medina by a group of Muslims in Medina. This group of Muslims met at the city of Aqaba. Does anyone know what happened in Aqaba? Can anyone raise their hands? Tell me what happened there. Well, go ahead.
There were tribes that were disputing inside Medina. This was prior before they actually became Muslim. And they had heard about Prophet Muhammad and the influence he was having. And basically, they called him in as a mediator. And they both, the tribes, were willing to give their allegiance towards the Prophet for, I wouldn't say political purposes, but there was some political overtones.
Yes, I mean, ultimately what happened is that there was an agreement. There was a delegation from Medina that came to the Prophet. They met in Aqaba. They agreed that he was their leader. They became Muslim, in fact. But this was a prior agreement where the Muslims, or those individuals who had Muslim sentiments in Medina, encouraged the Prophet to come to Medina, accepted the Prophet's authority, accepted him as their leader. And that was the seed that eventually led to the immigration to Medina, eventually led for him moving from Mecca to Medina and being invited there. Now, when they originally came to Medina, the purpose basically was to create a new political and organizational unity in the city itself. You basically had a city that was in disarray. You had infighting. You had major groups in the city that just couldn't get along. It was affecting everything. It was affecting trade. It was affecting the political dispensation. It was affecting everything within the city itself. And so, in fact, they were pleading for the prophet to come. And one of the reasons why they were pleading, because of the example that he had already set, the integrity that he had already demonstrated, the compassion that he had already demonstrated as well, the truthfulness in terms of his character. This was very appealing. This had political juice, in a sense, in order to bring him into the city as a religious and a political leader. As I said, there had existed infighting between these different groups. Can anyone explain to me or tell me what were the different groups in Medina at that time? What was the ethnic or tribal composition or religious composition within Medina? Can we have someone other than Dawood?
Or idol worship.
So there were pagans, right? They were pagans who believed in the traditional Arab religion of idol worship.
There were a group of Jews.
There were more than one group of Jews. There were how many? There were basically three major tribes. Well, we won't get into the names because then we'll focus in on those names and we won't get the grand themes. Just want to deal with the grand themes. There were three major Jewish tribes in Medina at that time. And from them they had sub-tribes. It's very important that you understand the tribal structure in terms of Arabia. You see, a tribe, can anyone explain to me what a tribe is? Anyone? Because this is not something that we use nowadays, a tribe. Do you go around saying, I'm from the tribe of so-and-so, you're from the tribe of so-and-so? No? But if you grew up when I grew up, they would say that, oh, that's the Kinney family, or ooh, that's the Williams family, or ooh, that's the Matthew family. So
Descendants of some patriarch.
that's right, the descendants of some patriarch. But what eventually happens is that a tribe is a vast extended family. That's basically what it is. A vast extended family. And those individuals who who attach themselves to that extended family. You know how you have best friends and they become part of the family? They have attached themselves to your family, right? Well, there were individuals like that were attached to these large extended tribal families, right? Those groups were part of the overall composition of Medina too. So you had these three major Jewish tribes who controlled most of the commerce. They controlled most of the highly lucrative commercial or agricultural oasis in that area. Remember, we're talking about a desert here, right? So to control an oasis and control the farming that goes on, the agriculture that goes on, you control a great amount of the wealth that's disseminated in that society. There are only two ways to make wealth. One is agriculture, the other is trade. And if you're participating in agriculture, you're also participating in trade. So you're getting the best of both worlds. So there were these three major Jewish tribes. There were the pagan Arabs. There were the individuals that were attached to the tribe. tribes of these three major tribes as well. There were sub-tribes of them. And all of these different groups were infighting with one another. There were the Muslims that had embraced Prophet Muhammad's message that were in Medina. And there were infighting among these various groups. This is the context. This is the environment, the political and the social and the economic environment in which Prophet Muhammad comes into, right? Everyone has different interests. You know, not everyone is on the same page with the Prophet coming in. Not everyone has the same set of motivations for why they want the Prophet to come, right? You have different groups with different motivations, different reasons why they want the Prophet to come, right? Some groups saying, well, he can bring peace. With peace, trade will be prosperous. With trade being prosperous, we can make more money. Other groups saw that this was a unique, religious, spiritual, important personality that we need to renew not only this city, but the whole world. I mean, they recognized him as a prophet. They recognized that this was the prophet that was spoke of. Then you had the Jewish groups and the concerns that they had vis-a-vis the prophet, bringing peace, better trade. Maybe we can persuade them in terms of our way of thinking. The Muslims are already praying in the direction of Jerusalem. So maybe we can persuade him in terms of our way of thinking. We'll bring him in, but maybe we can co-opt him in terms of our program, right? So this was the existing situation. The Muslims come in. They come in as immigrants, right? They come in as immigrants. The term that's normally used is the muhajirun. Basically means immigrants. They come in, they leave home, they come to Medina, and they're greeted by the helpers, or the Ansar. They're greeted by, that for every muhajirun was coupled with an Ansar. That the Prophet Muhammad had told them to pair off together. He had told the various immigrants who had come from, the Muslim immigrants who had come from Mecca, to pair off together, to support one another. You have to realize that these people, when they left Medina, they had nothing. When you get up and you just leave, if you left Detroit today, if you left Detroit today, within 24 hours, and you had to bag up everything that you had and leave on threat of death, right? You couldn't go to the bank, you couldn't do anything, you just had to leave. You couldn't take anything with you but what you could carry on your back. How long would that last you?
Not very long.
Not very long. And that was the existing situation that the Muslims left under. These were the circumstances that they left under. They left their property, they left their wealth, they left their goods, they left their livelihood, their ways of making living. So when they come into Medina, they don't have any of these circumstances. They don't have any of these things. One of the few individuals that was able to carry enough wealth with him in order to have a livelihood was the third Khalifa, Uthman. Other than that, most of the Muslims had to scratch out a meager living, or had to depend upon the helpers in Medina to help them with maintaining some sort of livelihood, or had to depend upon the charity that the Prophet would extend to them. Some of them even slept under the covered section of the mosque because they just didn't have the livelihood. Now, recognize that at this very time, you have a very prosperous, a very sophisticated, a very knowledgeable Jewish community within Medina itself, right? the prophet comes in, he forges a new concept that really didn't exist in that world. A new concept of brotherhood, a new concept of religious freedom, a new concept of free speech, a new concept, the rights of the individual, a new concept that human life is sacred, a new concept that that people have the right to have the property that they have. And he forges a unity among the existing people within the territory of Yathrib, or what was known as Medina at that time, right? Or what was known as Yathrib, but Medina, right? He forms a new political dispensation. Forget the fancy words, but I just had to throw that one out there. But he forms a new political order, a new social order. And he starts it by establishing what was known as a written agreement. A written agreement that tied in all of the existing parties into Medina. We could call it a charter, we could call it a constitution, we can call it a written agreement, but it was something similar to a constitution. There's no question. Within this constitution, the Jewish groups are recognized, their right of religion is recognized, their right to own the property that they have is recognized, their right for protection is recognized, that the Muslims, that Prophet Muhammad states in the document that if someone was to attack any individual within the precincts of Medina, within the territory of Medina, that everyone would support that individual, that each group would support that individual who was attacked, so that the city itself was considered sacred in a sense. The city was considered sacred, that if any outside force attacked the city, that every member of the city would be responsible to respond to that attack. The pagan Meccans appear as the common enemy. And this is very important in terms of the vacillation, meaning that back and forth movement of the Jewish opinion vis-a-vis the agreement that Prophet Muhammad, the written agreement or the Constitution of Medina that Prophet Muhammad establishes. Remember that the pagan Arabs in Mecca are still at war with the Muslims, are still at war with the Muslims in Medina, are still at war with the Muslims that are existing in Mecca, that are underneath their control, who were not able to escape, or are now prisoners. They're beginning to they're beginning to prevent the Muslims from going to the pilgrimage. This is when this takes place. They prevent the Muslims from going to pilgrimage. In response to being prevented from going to, in response to being prevented from going on the pilgrimage, then the Muslims, in turn, began to attack the trade caravans. Caravans it could have been 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 40 camels packed with trade goods that would move up and down Arabia from different places and trade their goods. Well, the Muslims began attacking these caravans, in retaliation for being prevented from going to the precincts in Mecca. Now, it's important to understand why it was important for them to go to the precincts in Mecca, because that's presented as if, why would they attack them for, being not allowed to go to the Hajj and perform the rites of Hajj, a religious rite. I mean, what other important issue could there be Is there any other important issue than the right to practice your religion as you see fit? Is there anything more important than that? The right to practice your religion as you see fit, and not being barred from doing that. That was one of the reasons why they moved from Mecca to Medina, was to be able to practice the religion as it has been prescribed. Remember, nothing was instituted in Mecca. Nothing. The prayer was not instituted in Mecca. The call to prayer was not instituted in Mecca. Zakat was not instituted in Mecca. There was nothing in terms of the practical dynamics of the religion. You know, the everyday stuff. You know, the stuff that, you know, the stuff that makes a religion what it is. You know, the nuts and bolts. You know, the nuts and bolts of the religion were established in Medina. The grand principles were articulated in Mecca. You know, these grand notions, La ilaha illallah, you know, these grand theological notions were articulated in Mecca. But the nuts and bolts, in terms of distinguishing itself as a unique religion, were established in Mecca. Were established in Medina. But not only that, that's important enough in and of itself. But not only that, this was a means of coming together of all of the different tribes. All of the different tribes from all over Arabia would converge on Mecca during certain months of the year. And there was a lot of business and trade that was transacted. There was a lot of commerce that went on. There was a lot of networking that took place. So it was very, very important, not only from a religious standpoint, but from a political standpoint, and a social standpoint, for them to be able to go and to participate in these, in the rites of Hajj, in the pilgrimage. It wasn't a full-blown pilgrimage at that time, but in order to be able to participate in these rites that existed in Mecca at that time, it was very important, not only from a religious standpoint. It's important to know that, because a lot of the books, they don't point this out. There was more at stake than just religion, as we, quote unquote, think of religion. So, some of the things that, some of the things that were inherent in the Constitution, as I said, it unified the city. It recognized all of the various entities that were part of the city, whether they were pagan Arabs, whether they were Jews, whether they were Muslims. It recognized their individual communities, but it sought to establish a unified society made up of these three different communities, giving equal rights and equal protections to these three entities within the city. Equal rights and equal protections, right? Now, how was Muhammad able to do this? How was he able to solidify these groups? Muhammad Hakel says this: Muhammad's own conduct, his great humanity, compassion, and faithfulness, his ongoing charity and goodness to the poor, oppressed, and deprived, as well as the prestige and influence which these qualities had won him among all the people of Yathrib, that's what Medina was called. All these enabled him to conclude the pact of friendship, alliance, and cooperation in the safeguarding of religious freedom throughout the city. He goes on to say, in our opinion, this covenant, this means an agreement, covenant, sacred agreement is called a covenant. This covenant is one of the greatest political documents which history has known. Such an accomplishment by Muhammad at this stage of his career had never been reached by any prophet. You see, the preceding prophets did not actually establish a political order. meaning that they articulated a religious message. They expressed religious principles and a religious message, but they didn't create a concrete example of how those high principles should be lived in a human life. That's the beauty of Islam. That's the beauty of Muhammad. Not only were these high religious principles were expressed, but they were also demonstrated in terms of a concrete example, in terms of how they should be lived. You know how you have the map, you know? You know a map, you know what a map is, right? A map is what?
Directions.
A map is what?
Guidance.
A map is a kind of guidance, that's right. But you have the map and you have the territory, right? Right?
Map tells you how to get there.
Yeah, map is theory, right? It's not the territory, right?
No, it's
But if you confuse the map with the territory, you may get in trouble, right? Right? Because sometimes there are roads in the territory that are not on the map, right?
That's true.
Right? So the map is theory, it's not the territory. So you have to have some concrete example in order to marry theory to. If you don't have the concrete example to marry theory to, then what can come in between are lies and deception. This is how propaganda is created. What you do is you separate. You separate that which is the sign from that which it signifies. Right? We all know what a table is, right? Right? And a table is something where you place a plate on and you eat, right? But if I can convince you that a table is a chair, then I have created deception. If I sit on this every day, this is not a table, this is a chair. You see, I sit on it every day, and it serves me real well, and I hold my plate in my hand. What I've done is I've separated the sign from what it signifies, and I've created deception. And that's the essence of propaganda. Now, here we've done with a concrete example. Now, what about notions of freedom, justice, and equality, and mercy, and compassion? You see. So if you can separate physical objects from what they signify, what do you think would happen with abstract objects? So let me get back to the written agreement. What did it mean for the Jews? It acknowledged the Jews in their religion, in their position in society. It determined their rights and duties. It stipulated that the Muslims were one community, the Jews were one community, and the pagan Arabs were one community. But all three were committed to a greater, this is the document stating this, but all three were committed to a greater unity within the city of Medina. This was the idea. Now I'm quoting an aspect of the document that I extracted from Muhammad Hagel's work. And this is the Constitution of Medina, written by Prophet Muhammad. Any Jew who follows us is entitled to our assistance and the same rights as any one of us, without injustice or partisanship. The greater community is one. It's interesting how this is used. No believer, see, you didn't say no Muslim, no believer shall enter into a separate peace without all other believers whenever there is fighting in the cause of God, but will do so only on the basis of equality and justice to all others. You see, they were in a very, very precarious, a very, very tricky position. You have the Muslims in Medina, but the pagans, the Quraysh in Mecca, were trying to form deals with these different groups, even the Muslims. In some sense, it was almost like the American Civil War, because you had brothers and sisters separated. You had mothers and sons. You had fathers and sons that were separated on different lines, Once they became Muslims, then they split from the existing system that existed in Mecca. You see, you have to realize that what existed before Islam was this whole notion that you belong to a tribe. You belong to this tribe. And that was your identity. You know, the fact that you belong to the tribe. A kind of nationalism. A kind of nationalism to which we're very familiar in some respects. You know? The whole idea of blackness, you know? Well, this whole notion was that they belonged to a tribe, a group, and that to move outside of that group meant suicide. It meant literal suicide because your whole support structure, your whole support system was based upon the tribe. Your livelihood was based upon the tribe. Your means of feeding yourself was based upon your allegiance to the tribe. And if you didn't have a tribe that you were related to, and you were just a separate individual, it was necessary that you attach yourself to a tribe. So the way in which you gained acceptance in society and the way in which you maintained your separate sense of identity was through the tribe. When Islam came, it changed all that. Because the new identity was the whole question of a Muslim, one who submits to the will of God. You see, that the new criteria is a higher notion of what constitutes a form of unifying people. That we have to unify on a higher principle than just blood ties. We have to unify in terms of our acceptance of a higher power. We will unite on the basis of that. We are Muslims. We are human beings. We will unite on the basis of being human beings, in effect. So this was what brought, this created a new dynamic. It created a new dynamic in the context of Medina. Because what it did, when they came in and they wrote the Constitution, and Prophet Muhammad became the mediator, became the one who would mediate any disputes between these three communities. If there was something that these three communities could not agree on, then the matter was left to Prophet Muhammad as written by the Constitution to mediate that event. However, the group, you see, the Muslim group says that we constitute one community. And the Jewish group constitutes one community, and the pagan Arab group constitutes one community. But we constitute one society for a greater good in terms of the good of the city itself, you see. And that everyone had to pitch in terms of their contributions, in terms of economically, for the protection of the city, in terms of war, in terms of protection of the city, in terms of whatever means in terms of the protection of the city as a whole. The quote goes on, "No unbeliever shall be allowed to place under his protection against the interests of a believer any wealth or person belonging to the Quraysh." You see, the Quraysh is trying to infiltrate the ranks of the people of Medina and to gain influence. And that may mean whatever, you know. They had influence in Medina, some marginal influence in Medina, and the Prophet was trying to prevent and to do away with whatever influence that they had, because basically they were staunch enemies of Islam, and that was the only approach that he could take with them. The Constitution goes on, "As the Jews fight on the side of the believers, they shall spend of their wealth on equal par with the believers. The Jews of Banu Aus are a community alongside the believers The Jews have their religion and the Muslims theirs. Both enjoy the security of their own populace and clients. That means people attached to the tribe, except the unjust and the criminals among them. Yes. Oh, yes. I agree. I'm freezing. I've been freezing since I got here. She's thinking about that baby, though. She's not even thinking about herself. See, I'm thinking about myself. That's the difference between a woman and a man. At any rate, this is quite interesting, this whole notion, accept the unjust and the criminals, you see. But let me go on. The document establishes freedom of faith, freedom of speech, unity of the city, sanctity of human life, the right of property. That's real curious. Because when you read the American Constitution, I mean, we go on and go on and go on about we the people, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all people are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That's not the Constitution. That's the Declaration of Independence that was written by Thomas Jefferson. The Constitution emphasizes property rights over just about anything else. Property rights are paramount in the Constitution. Even over individual rights, property rights are crucial. In fact, to vote, one had to own property originally. However, the Bill of Rights came as an afterthought. They're not part of the Constitution. They had already written the Constitution, and then they said, oh, we forgot something. Oh, freedom of religion, that would be a good idea. Freedom of speech, that would be a good idea. You see? They forgot something. So, the document establishes freedom of faith, freedom of speech, unity of the city, sanctity of human life, the right of property, forbiddance of crime. It constitutes a breakthrough in the political and civil life of the world at that time. It really does. It constitutes a philosophical breakthrough, really, in terms of the time that this took place. However, because of the integrity of this man, of this prophet, of our prophet, and because of the diplomatic nature, his political genius in a sense, to not alienate people, large numbers of people began to embrace Islam in Medina. Even Jews began to embrace Islam in Medina. Even Jewish learned people began to embrace Islam. With their whole families began to come into Islam. Right? Now, people are having second thoughts. People who were, in this thing, they were in it initially. Now they have second thoughts as to, how much further they want to go along this path that Muhammad is going in, because they see the possibility of their influence, their political power being sapped away from them. So as the numbers of people began to convert to Islam, Muslim power in the city begins to increase. Muslim influence in the city begins to increase. And the Jews begin to have second thoughts about this arrangement, this dispensation, this political dispensation. Hegel points out one particular Rabbi Abdullah ibn Salam, approached the prophet and announced to him his conversion, as well as that of his family. He asked the prophet to go back to the Jewish community and say, hey, run this by them, see how they will respond to this, Just ask them, a roundabout way, because he feared how the Jews would react to the fact that he would convert to Islam. Hegel points out that this was the event which triggered their suspicions of Muhammad and their denial of his prophethood. And at this point, what begins to happen within the, among among Muslim and Jewish relations is that certain individuals and groups among Jews in Medina began to infiltrate Muslim ranks and began to ask insincere questions of the Prophet in order to shake the faith of the less knowledgeable Muslims within the community and have some influence upon them, and to turn them in terms of their thinking, in terms of their loyalty to the Prophet. They began to question the Prophet openly about certain matters. To give you an idea of one question that some of the Jews used to ask, Hakel points out, this is one of the questions. If God created creation, who then created God? Sounds like someone who has a very logical mind to come up with this kind of question. Remember, the Quran can be either an argument for you or against you. When you're reading it, it's an argument for you and against you. I come to those passages and I say, ooh, that's me. I come to those passages and I say, oh, that's me too. So it's an argument for you or against you, you see. You just have to be sincere with yourself. The Prophet's response was this: say, God is one, the eternal. He was not born, nor did he give birth to anyone. None is like him. Assalamu alaikum. Oh, any questions? You can just ask general questions about anything. It doesn't have to be about this. But we can ask about this or aspects somewhat related to this. But ask some questions, please. Don't just sit there. Any question is a good question. Yes.
Yes, I made hard last year. I was wondering why did that the Imam said haram, women and men that pray together from this, and the other man should maybe 5 miles away. It's like different.
It's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. It's a wonderful question. It's a wonderful question. Rituals serve two purposes. Rituals serve the purpose of creating an harmony between you and that which is transcendent. The idea is to bring you in contact with the cosmic order of things, right? You see, everything in creation is Muslim, right? That's what we hear, right? Everything in creation is Muslim because ingrained in its very pattern is an order. It's a pattern where it must follow the dictates of what God has determined. But man has a choice to follow the moral law or not, right? Rituals are to get you in line with the pattern of creation so that you move just like the trees move with creation. You move like the wind. You move like the sky. You move like the clouds. You're one with creation. The man that is truly in tune with creation can accomplish anything. Just like the tree can accomplish anything. The way in which you get in tune with that, one of the ways in which you get in tune with that, one of the mechanisms is through rituals. The Hajj is a ritual, and rituals serve another purpose. Actually, there are 4 purposes, but we'll do with these 2. That was one. But this one here is that it's speaking to a higher concept. You see, the Hajj is speaking to a higher concept in terms of that humanity is one. You see, when we go into the precincts of Hajj, we take off our national dress, right? We take off the dress of class. We take off the dress of wealth. We take off the dress of national representation. We take off the dress of gender. You see? And that's why when you go into the precincts, you see the one God, right? One humanity. So that distinctions of gender cannot, they don't work. You see, the whole idea that distinctions of gender have to drop in this context. And that there is no distinction between man and woman in the context of the Hajj. Humanity is one. So it's promoting this notion that there is no distinction between male and female in the eyes of God. We're all different. And women are not the same as men. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that we were all created from the Nefsun Wahida, right? One entity, one soul. That's what it's speaking to. It's speaking to the integrity of the human person that transcends gender. You see, when you're thinking of creation, I had this debate with a professor of mine. When the Quran says we created you from a nefsun wahida, he said it's Adam. I said, is this the biological Adam you're talking about, or what Adam are you talking about? Because it doesn't say Adam there. It could have said Adam. We created Adam. So what are you talking about? Adam. Is this a biological man that you're talking about? I don't want to get gross, but you understand what I'm saying by a biological man. Or who are you talking about? This is what this is talking about in the Hajj. It's talking about this whole notion of the oneness of humanity based upon that concept of nefsun wahida. That the gender is not permissible in this context because we want you to tune into this greater principle of the oneness of humanity. One God, one humanity, one world. Anything else?
The question I want to know is, like when you was talking about when the Muslims and Christians was in Medina and this concept Prophet Muhammad had among the communities,
Yeah.
And it seems like when you explain that, I get an idea of thinking, well, look like everybody got along. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But what happened to that concept now? I mean, why did Muslims go away from that? I mean, what happened? Is there a Muslim country now that still practices that same principle? You know what I mean? I mean, is it possible that the Christian and the Muslim and the Jew are they living together like that now? Why is it so separated? Why is so much conflict?
That's the other class, really. It's really the answer to that question is too long. It truly is. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. It's truly unfortunate that you don't have a Muslim country that really respects the sanctity of religion, of other people's religion.
Well, I see that over here too. I mean, I can understand. Look like I can understand over here. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
look like, I mean, when you explain that, it seems so good. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
everybody can get along. But now you don't see that. I wonder what happened. What happened?
Well, they didn't get along for very long. But
Oh, okay.
that grew there. However, the concept was there. The principles were set forth. They were going through such a rapid change of events that people were just absorbed because the power of the message of Islam, in terms of the personality of the Prophet being on the scene, Islam just spread like wildfires throughout the territory. And people just began to embrace Islam because of the beauty of its message represented by the character of its prophet. But it's really unfortunate that you don't have Muslim countries that can latch on to this idea of the oneness of humanity in essence, which the Hajj speaks of, but they can't get their hand around it. However, you know, that's a long story why that isn't so, and it has something to do with that metamorphosis in terms of Sunni orthodoxy, that what is considered Orthodox Islam is the development of a system of ideas that have gotten away from the essence of the Quran, you see. And so they're enacting principles that they truly believe are Islamic principles, but have gotten too far away from the basic foundation of the book. And they refuse to go back and examine the book. They're still reading commentaries on the book. They don't read the book anymore. They read commentaries on the book. That's the fundamental problem. They need to start reading the Quran again, and quit reading the commentaries on the Quran.
I have a question. What about the part where it says in the Quran that they knew the name of this one to come like they knew the names of their own sons, meaning Prophet Muhammad? Was this in answer to the Jews? You know, in prophecy, they knew that a blessing was to come through the tribe of Ishmael.
Yes.
And so those knowledgeable people knew, knowledgeable in religion, you know, you allude to the knowledgeable rabbis and the Jews knew that one was to come.
Yes.
And
that's why some of the knowledgeable rabbis in the context of Medina were converting to Islam. I mean, they recognized the integrity of this message, the integrity of the man and the integrity of the message, and they just submitted. You know, they say this is it. I mean, we cannot deny the sincerity of those Jews who recognized the sincerity of the Prophet and his message and embraced it. But there were also Jews who were interested in maintaining the status quo, or at least some semblance of the status quo, so that they could maintain the position of power that they had. Really not recognizing that their power was never threatened with the Prophet's coming to ascendancy anyway, as long as he was on the scene, you know. But, no, that's true. Yeah. You had a question?
I attended Hajj this year, and got to making some talk was it's the station of Ibrahim. What is the purpose of the station of Ibrahim?
Well, I don't know. Maybe someone can help me out. I've never made the Hajj,
that's where
Station of Ibrahim.
the sacrifice is supposed to take place,
Is
right?
that where the sacrifice takes place?
It's supposed to have, Abraham was challenged to sacrifice his son Ishmael.
Oh, okay. Now I know the relationship. Okay. Do you got the relationship now too?
Yeah, I got it.
You got it? You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Because of, I mean, you have the greater Hajj and the lesser Hajj, right? You have the Hajj after the, greater Eid and lesser Eid, I'm thinking of. You got the greater Hajj and the lesser Hajj too, but, so you got it. Anyone else? No? Okay. Again, I thank you for having me, and until we meet again. Assalamu alaikum.
Taught here stateside, and I guess amongst us he would be what you would consider a scholar, and to get the type of class that we have gotten right here is really college level, that we'd be paying $1,500, $2,000 a semester to get this information that he's sharing with us for free. So I encourage you to come to these classes. Another note, and this is relating back to the khutbah that I gave Friday, the Jews and also the Christians, there was a tribe called Nadir. There was a Christian tribe who was also incorporated. This tribe was also incorporated into one single unified community with the Muslims. So we had the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims in the city of the Deen, which really, that's what El Medina means, the city of the Deen. That we're all incorporated into one unified community. And like the professor was saying, when we look at Muslim countries right now around the world and look at our Constitution, really the spirit of the American Constitution is more Islamic than, let's say, the Constitution of Saudi Arabia, who claims to rule by Sharia. If you really look at our Constitution, the spirit of our Constitution in America is more Islamic, and the behavior of our government and the behavior of the Muslims here you'll find to be superior than most of the, well, right now I can't name one Muslim country right now. There's countries that are populated by Muslims. I can't name one country off the top of my head that rules by the Quran and the example or the Constitution, the example that was given to us by Prophet Muhammad, the praise and peace be upon him. Today we're having a ta'aleem by one of the young adults today. We're going to try to have a ta'aleem at least twice a month here at the masjid by a youth or a young adult. And I believe that today Imam Abdul Malik Muhammad will be giving ta'aleem about Uswatul Hasana, a concept that we've been hearing a lot about lately, a concept that is articulated in the Quran, the concept of Uswa. So without further ado, we'll call up Imam Abdul Malik Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum.